Hey, it's the rundown. Another episode on deck right now. For you. It's me, Joe, and Brandon sitting across from me on the screen. I guess you can say it's going to be a good episode for y'all. I'm on my phone. My computer, like my laptop camera, stopped working. So if you might be saying, "Wow, Joe, you're super clear," that's because the good old iPhone technology. So shout out Apple. But Brandon, how are you today?
Fuzzy but good. No, I'm just kidding. But my Dell webcam looks very, very minuscule in quality compared to the gorgeous iPhone 14 screen that we got from Mr. Joe Nagy right now.
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
right, big dog.
yeah, looking good. But it's been a crazy week. I'm in my last week of school here, so pretty crazy stuff. But hey, we got an edition of the rundown that the people have been waiting for. I mean, we're talking Lions draft today. We're talking Tigers on their little bit of a 4 series win streak, and we got some shuffle ups in the CSAA baseball and softball, Joe. So people are ready. I think we got to give it to them.
Dude, dog, I'm loving it. So we'll obviously start out with some with some CSAA baseball. Brand, if you want to take it away right now, just kind of chat it up. I'm excited to see how it's going to play out.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the biggest thing that we saw in Tuesday's games is obviously where we're kind of highlighting as well as into Wednesday's games. But you saw Grant sweeping at Central Montcalm. That's a huge, huge sweep for Grant. They're really piling up the table now as a true team in that top three. You got Reed City and Nuevo playing to a split there at Reed City. So that really kind of goes to show those two teams as evenly matched as we thought they were going to be entering that matchup. And then especially you're looking at the standings in the outlook. You got Big Rapids at the top. Grant is tailing right behind. Chip Hills is hanging around in that 3 spot right now. And I believe as I'm checking my notes, they got a sweep yesterday, a non-conference against Montebello. So they're looking really good ahead of their matchup at home, I should say, against Central Montcalm. That's going to be a very intriguing matchup now. But right now in baseball, Big Rapids still at the top despite a blemish there at Central Montcalm. They're still controlling their destiny and they're winning these games in sweep mode, except for one. But I think especially you're looking at Chip Hills as a team that's really making some noise this year. You got to give credit to their offense; they've been able to score runs when they need it. And Grant is a team that is really scrapping together some really big wins against some big opponents, and not only that, getting two at a time. I mean, right now for that team, they are really looking like a team that we're going to be talking about here in recent months, in recent weeks, I should say, upcoming into the next month of a team that might be really fighting for the crown at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think, especially because we kind of thought near the first part of this season that Big Rapids was just going to kind of run away with everything, especially seeing that. But seeing that they lost to Central Montcalm and kind of having that little skid, then they go on and lose a game to Traverse City Central. I mean, it's going to kind of shake it up a little bit. Now, also, they won the second game against Central Montcalm 15-8, and they won the second game against Traverse City Central 20-0 in 3 innings. So obviously, it's a little bit of a flip flop. But I mean, Coach Scarpelli is going to want to try to get that consistency down a little bit. But I mean, like you said, Grant kind of coming in out of nowhere with a good sweep. I mean, you're going to see Central Montcalm too, especially with that one against Big Rapids. That can give them some solid momentum. So is it chalk? Not yet. You can still see some movement here in the later parts of this season. I mean, we're getting down to the wire here as my computer has nothing loaded up. So right now I'm just going off of memory, not my notes. So we'll see how this plays up. But I'm still very excited to see kind of what teams make this little push near the back end. Big Rapids is obviously in the driver's seat right now, but this is also a time too where you got to look forward to district play and stuff like that. Look over and out of your conference, who you're going to be facing off against and how that's going to play out. And honestly, I'm here for it because that just means it's going to be a lot more better baseball to be played and a lot more better games that we're going to be able to kind of talk about as well.
Yeah, and especially these teams, we have good teams that are especially right behind Big Rapids. Obviously, mentioning Chip and Grant. Reed City's right behind at 7-4. They're definitely still in the mix. Nuevo has fought their way through. They're just really looking for some sweeps. That's really all that team is missing is that consistency of 2 wins in a night, and that's really been holding them back a little. But we've seen some really good players overall. I mean, so far here this year. I mean, you saw Emmett Lingaman. He was the arm that ended up derailing the Cardinals' perfect season to get the win there against the Cardinals in his effort. But you've also seen Grant's had some really good pitching staffs and in years past, and they've kind of rolled that over, and they've had consistency enough to win these ball games, and they've been able to scrap them out. So I think that's really a testament to where these teams are really at right now, early in the season. Now, how will we adjust? Because obviously we saw the bats weren't necessarily as consistent in the early part of the season. We talked about that on the last couple of shows where we're talking about the weather, how that's had an impact. Now we're starting to get towards the second half saying, okay, now we're going to start seeing these teams how they play consistently in conference play, as well as adding those non-conference games, getting them ready for tournament at the end of the year. But it should be fun. But you could say the same thing about softball right now. I mean, you still got Big Rapids at the top. Reed City has played phenomenal. They swept Newaygo. They're really on a roll right now. White Cloud and Lakeview getting a split. Between those two teams, Montcalm looks like the team that we've seen in years past that could make some noise through them beating Grant, I believe, at home by a combined 15-1. So they took care of business, and I think right now for these teams chasing Big Rapids, I mean, you look at Reed City, they've got the young talent now that's bringing the experience along. Montcalm is starting to get some offensive consistency, and they're playing some good defense. So I think you're looking at some of those teams and all the other teams as well, White Cloud and Morley Stanwood, Tri-County, those teams are still trying to battle through and get a good season together. And so right now we're seeing a little bit of a shift as far as the run totals now have changed a little bit, and you're starting to see these teams more consistently finding their identity on how they're playing the game. And for some of these teams, it's not necessarily scoring all of these runs that is helping them win games. If it's 2-0, it's still the same thing as a 12-10 win in the W column.
Yeah, and this is kind of what we've been waiting for, because near the start of the season, it just took some time to get back into the swing of things. But now when you have all these teams who are hitting their stride, getting ready to really just kind of cement themselves in where they need to be for, later on with the postseason, as well as these last few weeks of conference play, this is really what we've been waiting for. And I'm excited for it because Reed City has just been dealing so far, like you said, Central Montcalm too, and then Big Rapids obviously at the top. So I'm excited mainly because this just means better stuff to talk about. And we were kind of, alluding to the same things these past few weeks. I mean, you kind of talked about it too, where we were just saying like bats aren't super hot, but now you get the teams who, have players who are in a couple streaks. You get the teams who have maybe some of those diamond in the rough type players who really weren't showing a whole lot of promise at the start of the season. Now, they're getting a little bit more confidence under their belt. So this is the time too where you kind of get a little bit of run from some teams who you're not really expecting it from. And like you said, White Cloud and stuff like that. We'll see if they can pull some stuff together. But I think Big Rapids right now is on a solid spot to take the conference, but don't count out Reed City and some of the other teams as well too early.
For sure. It's going to be an exciting race, and, it really begins in May. So right now we've turned the corner, turned the page in the pamphlet of the days in the year, and I think it's going to be fun to see where this next month takes us, because we'll find out who these teams are really made of when we get into the later parts of May. So it should be exciting.
For sure, as you see me typing for my next thing, because my camera is very low, so not the most ideal situation, but we'll move on now from CSAA and stuff like that now to professional sports. What do you want to start with, Brandon? Tigers, Lions, what you thinking?
We can stay on the diamond, go with the Tigers, and I think it's
I like the way you
especially
think.
especially to think now where we're at as far as being Motown fans. It's been a really exciting last 2 weeks. I mean, we're talking about the draft last week. As far as being in Detroit, that was really exciting. And you're looking at the Tigers right now. I'm counting it right now on my other screen here on my notes. 4 straight series wins. I mean, this is great for the city of Detroit, because we're not seeing the consistency of putting together this giant win streak like some of these other teams have had, where they've rarely rallied off 6-7 games in a row. But they're winning 2 out of 3 games at a time, and I think that's certainly something to note of. And I think especially, I mean, this offense has kind of still been sputtering. We've been relying on our arms quite a bit so far. I mean, this team right now is batting, I believe, an average of 227 as a team. That's 22nd in Major League Baseball. And I think that's something that has kind of hurt as far as the consistency of the offense, especially just not making contact in the right places. I think we've started to see hitters have really kind of hit their stride. I mean, Wencio Perez looks amazing right now. What a young talent he is. Riley Green has really been doing what we've been expecting him to do. Torque, we're still waiting on. But, I mean, you're seeing a lot of these other additions as well. Like Urshela was a really big startup for us in the beginning of the year. How about Mark Canha? That was a huge signing for us. He's been great right now. And so you're starting to see that, but I mean, right now the pitching has really been the story of this team. There's no question about it. And I think especially when you look at this team, especially in WHIP, I mean, third in baseball still at a 1.10 and only allowed 225 hits so far this year through all of our 31 games, sitting at 18-3 overall. I mean, can't really be mad about that, and especially for where we are in the standings, I mean, it just looks even better to be a Motown fan right now.
Yeah, I'm loving where we're at right now. The thing is that our batting. Here's the thing: pitching can really win you series. It can win you a lot of games. And if we keep on with this, 2 out of 3 in this, and we just win series, that's going to set us up really well. That could really lock us in for a wild card spot. Seeing the AL Central right now, it's not the best in baseball because you look at schedule wise. Indians are up there with a 20-10 record, but you still need to watch out. They've also been playing some teams who aren't like the upper echelon of MLB baseball. But that's going to be a recipe for, hey, we'll get a wild card spot maybe at the end of the year. But you still got to pay attention. We got to start hitting some baseballs, man. It's kind of wild. Spencer Torkelson right now is just at a spot where no home runs have been hit. It's not a big deal, but when you're batting, what is it, a 219, and you're known for your power and you're known for your offensive ability to get runs across the board and to get on base as well. He only has a 291 on base percentage too. And I talked about it last week. There were some people kind of on some forums and stuff for Tigers saying, hey, maybe just send Torkelson down to AAA for a few weeks. Let him get his confidence back till he gets up. Or once he has that first home runs, maybe the floodgates will open up a little bit. But we're gonna see how it plays out. Riley Green's been playing lights out so far. Mark Canha too has been playing really well. 5 home runs for him. You mentioned that already. And then obviously Wenzel Perez going 3 home runs in one afternoon with a doubleheader where he got one from each side too in the game 2 of that weekend. Of that doubleheader, which is huge and great for the future of this organization. But you still got to make sure, hey, we got to get these batting averages up because when I'm looking at it, there's way too many guys who are in the 100s and the low 200s to make it a recipe for success and make a team that can actually do some damage later on. Because when we get those games that are outside of the AL Central, when we get a little glimpse of what we could see if we potentially make the playoffs, I'm not loving it right now. And what can you say more than just saying, hey, get the bats going. You have one of the best bullpens in the league. Your starting rotation's pretty darn solid as well. But just the hitting has got to get up some because there's been a lot of times I've watched this year where there's 2 guys on, or 2 guys on, maybe 3 guys on a bases juice situation. And then guess what? It's a double play or something like that, or a guy swings at a pitch out of the zone. Got to stay more content, got to stay more disciplined, and you got to get better at hitting for us to win a lot of baseball games so that way we can make the playoffs and get Detroit rocking again. We saw, okay, I know I'm ranting as well, but we saw how much Detroit rallies behind the Lions when you can get a playoff atmosphere in Motown and how much that can propel you to do that much better on the field of play. Tigers win its playoffs, and when you get Comerica Park bumping like that, there's almost no better place to be at. Of course, I've only been to 4 other Major League stadiums, but from what I do know, a playoff game at Comerica Park is really unrivaled by a lot of people. So, like I said, this whole thing is basically saying get the bats going, and you'll find some success.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Joe, especially grounding into double plays. This team seems to do that quite a bit. Not as much as other teams, but it seems like all of the 16 times that we've done that this year have been with runners in scoring position. It's just the most unfortunate thing. And it's not necessarily, of course, runner on first to get the double, but guys on first and second, or even bases loaded. We've had bases loaded and nobody out and ground into a double play to end the inning. So, but I think especially something to note, too, as I was looking here before we move over to the Lions, for the Tigers, 380 total bases this year is really not too shabby. It's right around average as far as in baseball.
Yeah.
With that 23rd best average. The team is making good contact. The problem seems to more be that we're kind of waiting to get into the count quite a bit for some of these early pitches. And I think maybe that's something that can change in the approach. Obviously, I'm not AJ Hinch. I'm not going to be a part of the hitting coaching staff in Detroit to make these changes, but maybe that's something that we can see more of guys. Obviously, they're taking a lot of pitches. They're obviously working a lot into the count. And obviously, that's a good thing at the end of the day because they're getting the right pitch. But maybe we're trying to more guess, maybe necessarily let these counts get a little bit later. Maybe get a little more aggressive earlier. Take some of those early fastball or off speeds that can be a little bit more predictable. But for this team right now, I think obviously we're still happy where we are. We're just talking about what we can do to be 31-0 as opposed to 18-13. And so at the end of the day, we're winning series, and that's all that matters. We'd love to see some of these starters keep going later into games. Jack Flaherty, double-digit strikeouts. That guy's really had an inspired campaign so far. We love to see that. Maeda's starting to come along a little bit. And so right now, we're looking at a really fun series upcoming here as we're going to be playing the Pinstripes. So that's going to be a really big test and see how we really go on the big stage. And from then on out, we're going to see really how it goes here with a little bit of a road stand as we'll have to go back to Cleveland, best team in baseball right now as well. So it's going to be really interesting, and we look forward to it.
Yeah. Me as well. I'm looking forward to that. And just keep in mind, it's a long season, so these series wins are good, and every loss you can't get too much hung up on it because if you if you base a if you base your happiness on a team off the losses in baseball and they're not very good, then hey, let me tell you what, you're going to be in for a world of hurt as it keeps going. But Tigers playing very well, getting series wins, which is the big thing. Only thing is got to get the bats juiced up and move on just a little bit more. As you know, Lions and Detroit hosted the draft for the NFL this year. Insane. The scenes were in Detroit. I saw some videos. What is it? 750,000 people over the span of the 3 days of the draft were there in downtown watching guys get picked, which is awesome. I knew Detroit had it in them. And the best thing about this is, before we kind of get into the picks and stuff that Detroit had and kind of our thoughts on it, this opens up a lot of opportunities for all-star games to come to Detroit. More drafts, NHL and stuff like that. Maybe NBA draft coming to Detroit because you're going to get a lot of people see, hey, Detroit's been that town. Detroit's been this type of ability to rally behind their teams and show that support. And I think that just shows a little bit more because breaking the record is a big deal. And it can't be done by a lot. But not only did we break it, we freaking shattered that thing.
Watching that draft and seeing all of the faithful in Detroit that night was amazing. I mean, breaking the draft record, and I mean, I'm talking to a lot of the guys that I know that were there, and then we obviously had all the guys that were watching the draft that I've talked about with a lot of the picks, and it was just saying like, man, I don't think we're ever gonna see this again. Like that's just the crazy thing is like we're gonna go to Green Bay, and it's like no offense to Green Bay, but are they gonna put up 700,000 people at that draft? I don't know. I think this is something that we might see as an anomaly, and there's no question that if you're in the NFL offices, you're saying, that was pretty fun. We might want to go back here soon. So I think the city of Detroit did well, and I think the Detroit team as well did well in what matters most, the draft. And I think especially with a lot of these great picks, I mean, we really solidified a position that needed a lot of looks, and that was the cornerback position. Obviously, we'll get into the players here in a little bit, but I think overall this draft, I think was more one of those drafts where you kind of looked at where we were fitting the needs, and we fit the needs even though we took the best players that were on the board. I mean, starting with Terry and Arnold, and then obviously getting to Ennis Rakestraw, you saw those guys still on the board, and you're like, wow, like they're still falling, and then Brad Holmes swoops and picks them right up, and obviously he mentioned in his pressers that those were just guys that we thought were not going to be on the board, and they were. And we went and got them because they're good football players. And obviously it fits really well because that's a position of need. Obviously losing Cam Sutton to all the off-field issues. Obviously Brian Branch is going to be kind of transitioning into maybe a nickel safety type of look. So he's not going to be necessarily looked at as a true corner to fill that spot. And so they went and got two guys that really did that. Obviously we took a lot of flyer picks. I mean, we're looking at some of these guys like Sion Vaki. I mean, the guy played safety, played running back for basically 2 games, and the dude put up 158 yards against the Pac-12. I mean, he was incredible. And so now you have him in the backfield. He can also play defensive back if they want. I mean, he's just a weapon. I mean, Christian Mahogany, that was a really good value pick later on. I mean, that kid out of BC was great this year. And then you add Giovanni Manu. This guy's a project tackle that if he can learn the game of football at an elite level, I mean, this guy's going to be unstoppable with his size and his measurables. He's going to be great. And then, I mean, obviously, you just got all the great picks as well that we got in free agency after the draft as well. And so, really, this team's really on the way up. And, I mean, I almost forgot as well, looking at my notes here about Mekhi Wingdo. I mean, Wingo's a dog. He's playing in the SEC, and he wreaked havoc with that LSU defense as well. He was a really steal pick later on in the draft because I believe his defense was a little bit overlooked because obviously Jaden Daniels really stole the show for that team last year. But those 6 picks, and then you obviously got all the undrafted free agents that you can see on the depth chart. I mean, I'm looking at it right now here on the screen above, and there's a lot of holes that are filled that we were looking in this draft hoping to fill, and they did it. And that's all you can ask them at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's big time, and I watching it and kind of checking out because I was actually in New York when it was going on, so I was looking at my phone. I was at a Yankees game, and I kept on pulling up the rounds and stuff like that to check out what was happening. And I was very, very pleased. 2 thumbs up from me. Mr. Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell and them cooked once again. One of the coolest parts was all of them wearing the Dan Campbell jerseys. I think day 3. is when they did that. I think that shows just how close and well knit this front office is, and how cool it is to see this whole group kind of rock along. So I think we'll go now into kind of each guy, kind of give a little in depth what we think about it. So we'll just go round by round. Obviously, round one, Terry Arnold, corner out of Alabama. We're going to be Alabama in the NFL pretty much with what we got 5 or 6 guys from the Crimson Tide. But I really like this pick. I think we just needed we. The thing is, obviously, getting Carlton Davis, that was a huge pickup. He's going to be our wide receiver, or excuse me, our I can't even I can't speak right now. Our CB1,
CB1,
and then
CB1.
thank you very much, Brandon. I appreciate that. But and then being able to get Terry and Arnold to kind of hop in here, he'll be able to learn behind Brian Branch. He'll hop in there. He'll be a really great DB2, I think, and especially his attitude is just the best thing ever. Being able to see him at the draft and say, "Hey, I'm home. I'm ready to go," and he's excited. He's ready to prove a lot of people wrong. Not seeing that he's going to have a lot of haters because he is one of the better corners in this whole draft, but still being able to have that mentality, I think he's going to be able to really, really adopt the approach that Detroit has with the season, and it's Super Bowl or bust. And I think as a young guy, he's going to be able to pull it together real, real soon.
Yeah, I think you look at Terry Arnold, man, he's got the confidence, he's got the swagger, and it's a good kind of swagger, and it's not necessarily because obviously we've had a swaggy corner in our room before, and now he is back to Philly where he was
Not the
originally because
best.
he was
Not
not a
the
good,
best.
he was just not the fit that we needed, and obviously he did us a good service while he was here, but I think especially when you look at where Terry Arnold sits, I mean, he's going to be back with BB, and I think that's something that really speaks a lot with Brad Holmes is he's keeping a lot of these core guys together. And I think one of the biggest things that you look at, I mean, he's got the ball skills that a lot of these top corners in the league have here 3 years into their careers that he is really coming into this league. And I think that's something that really stuck out to me. He's a really smart player. He's willing to make tackles. He reminded me a little bit of Brian Branch, to be honest. Obviously, he's more of a shutdown corner. Branch more of a floating kind of safety nickel type of guy. But I think with the ball skills that you see, especially on tape, I mean, draft night, that's what they showed almost all the time. And it's because he's so good with it. And I think that is something that the Lions really need. And I think especially, and it's really kind of funny because you look especially with the compliment of him being such a ball hawk, being such a great guy. You're like, man, he's great, but I mean, can we get like a physical guy? And then literally a round later, you see Rakestraw fall into us, which, I mean, this guy plays as physical as any corner in this draft. And he slipped down the board, obviously, which was kind of surprising, I thought. But, I mean, obviously playing at Missouri, playing on that defense is a little bit different, I think, NFL scheme-wise than a lot of the coaches were looking for. That's just at least my guess. I could be very wrong there. But, I mean, him sliding down and you seeing the way that he plays on film, he's very physical. He's going to take guys. He's going to make tackles. He can play up front. He can play in press, and he's not scared of it. And I think that's something that the Lions have really been looking for because a lot of these rookies have been able to do that. And I think that's something that's really good. I mean, I'm looking right now. He still had 11 passes defensed. He had 73 tackles in his 24 games. I mean, that's exactly what you're looking for out of a physical corner, that if you're going to be playing some of these potential zone schemes that Aaron Glenn likes to do, then that's going to be a guy that's going to be up front. He's going to be making tackles on the outside for you, which that really helps fill a hole, and it just brings depth to that cornerback room that's been well needed for a long time now.
For sure. Sorry for kind of moving my fingers around the camera. I was
You're hiding a little
to
bit back there.
forgot
I
to
saw,
turn the notifications off of my phone, so I wanted to make sure that that wasn't getting a little bit annoying. But still, yeah, I think especially you see his ability in college, or Ennis Rakestraw's ability in college to play very well in the SEC, which recent years has been the best. The best conference to produce receivers in college football. I think that's a pretty much guaranteed, well-known fact so far. And for him to be able to do that well, I think you're going to see him come in here and play pretty darn solid all throughout the way that this upcoming season goes. Next one, Giovanni Manu, round 4, pick 126. I really like this one a lot. I think this is one of the ones that not a lot of people were expecting. He was drafted out of Canada, which not a lot of people thought was going to happen. I mean, you really haven't seen a lot of people come out of U Sports, especially in football. You really only see him kind of from the CFL, which we did sign a guy in free agency. But this guy, he's huge. He's massive. And I think for him to be able to learn behind guys like, just to name a few, Frank Ragnow, Taylor Decker, Penei Sewell, for him to be able to come in there as a young guy and to have that type of, I would say, potential. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. For him to have that potential and to have those mentors, dude, the sky's the limit for him. And I think Detroit's offensive line has just been the upper echelon of what it should be in the NFL. And for a guy to come in like that, who's going to be hungry and who has a lot to prove, he is a round 4 pick. Man, I'm real excited.
Yeah, he's especially going to be known as a project, and obviously a lot of flack that came Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell's way in this draft was for how much they traded. They traded up for a lot of guys, trading up for Terry and Arnold. They traded up to get Vaki as well as Manu. So you looked at a lot of those trades, and you're like, man, they're making a lot of these moves. Is it really worth the value? But at this point for the Lions, they're looking at we're going to fill all the holes we can now because we can win right now. And that's the mentality that Lions fans, I think, want to see. And obviously, we'll keep the value of some players later on. And obviously, we've really locked in our guys moving forward. Panay Sewell, you mentioned Joe, and as well, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Those guys 20 through 28 to 29 as far as their contract extensions, 4 and 5 years. So I think when you look at those guys and you have that long term, and now you bring in a guy that can develop behind those guys, and especially Manu. I mean, how big is he? 6'7", 350. That's how big this guy is. And he moves. I mean, he's played rugby, and I think that's something that really can bring that speed back because obviously his 4.96 doesn't necessarily speak out as really quick, but for a guy that big, that is quick, and that he has that ability and that tool
Faster
set
than
of
I can
playing
run.
rugby that he can be able to really excel at that tackle position and even maybe have the versatility to bump inside because he can move and he can move guys. And that's what you want out of a premier offensive line like this team has really shown.
Yeah. Is he, league ready right now? No. But in 3 months, who knows where he's going to be? That type of size, and especially coming from Canada, I mean, that type of motivation is going to do wonders for anybody that gets picked for this draft. Moving on, RB Sion Vaki, round 4, pick 132. Another trade up to get this guy. I like it. I wasn't really expecting it. I wasn't expecting us to draft a running back. It's not really what we needed by any means, but to have a guy who, because who knows what's going to happen. Maybe, David Montgomery in the next few years is going to move out. Who knows? I would love Jameer Gibbs to stay, but once his contract is up, people are going to see how valuable he is. It's going to be a lot of money thrown his way. Might as well have this guy learn behind the best and be a solid little RB3 when the time comes. But yeah, I like this one a lot, especially being from Utah, one of the premier teams in the Pac-12. I like it.
Yeah, he's an athlete. He's a utility dude, and I think that's something that really speaks with what Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have done. They've brought in a lot of versatility guys that can do a lot of things, and I think especially, I mean, you like Jamal Agnew, for example, kind of a guy that Detroit has known as that utility guy, and he really brought spark on both sides of the ball when he played, and now you kind of got a reload